Are they hearing me already?
Yeah, they hear you. They hear you and
Oh,
see you.
great. Hey, guys.
Yeah,
Very
cool.
excited to be here.
It'll be fun. So, whenever you're ready, you can get started. Like I said, I'll be here. I'll just be
Okay, amazing.
invisible.
I'll start. I'll be the person who doesn't understand which one are the bits in the screen. So like I preventively say I'm really sorry about that.
It's great. You're
But
doing great.
all right, let's start then. Cool. So my name is Asia. I've been working in international film distribution for the past 5 years, and I think I meet a lot of people that have no idea how it works, including producers that finish their film and then just like, great, I've done it. What? Good, now it's finished. I was like, no, actually, no, the tricky bit is kind of about to come. Well, not the tricky bit, but so I think it's super helpful to start running you through a little bit of how this side of the business works, because it really helps to meet with people that know what you do and know how you can help them. So, oh, fantastic. So that's me. Can everyone see my screen? I think so. I work for different companies here in London. London is becoming quite central actually for film and TV sales. Lionsgate moved their international office here. Endeavor just launched their international sales office here. So it's good to be here. I have most recently worked for a company called Independent, and some of the films that I've worked on are Lynn Ramsey's We Need to Talk About Kevin, Duncan Jones's Moon, Banksy's Exit Through the Gift Shop. I do not know who Banksy is. I've asked, I haven't been told, which is very annoying. But anyways. And more recently, we had Carol Morley's Out of Blue, which was in platform at TIFF last year. And then we had Sacha Pollock's Dirty God, which opened Rotterdam and was in Sundance just at the beginning of this year. Some of the other titles I worked on when I was working for a company called Goldcrest. And I always suggest there is a beautiful book about Goldcrest that talks about film finance. It's called My Indecision is Final, The Rise and Fall of Goldcrest Films. It's been written in the 80s, and it talks about sort of like one of the first attempts at creating a small European indie studio. It's quite fascinating if you have very many hours, because like this big, to spend on independent film finance. That's one that I recommend. I think it basically only exists like triple used on Amazon, but it can be found. So some of the stuff that I've been selling here was The Mission, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Local Hero, Gandhi. So some of the, biggest British films of the time. So let's go through a little bit of what I want to talk you through today. So I want to start by actually defining what is an independent movie, which is something that seems straightforward, but it's actually really not. And many people don't really know the difference. So I think that helps as a basic to start. I'll tell a little bit about the role of the sales agents, because that's what I do. So the key role for international distribution. We'll dive into film markets and the different ones, what do's and don'ts, and then briefly go through the changing landscape. So if it sounds good, I'll give it a start. So first question is, what is an independent film? So I always like to start my lecture by having people thinking a little bit about what is their definition of indie film. The majority of people get back to me saying, like, I imagine like a camera that doesn't move on a tree for like 4 hours. I'm like, yeah, that's not exactly it. You can actually diverge a little bit. So I'll start by showing you 10 movie posters. And according to your definition and what you have in mind that to you is an indie film, I'd like you to think which ones of these are indie and which one of these are studio films. You're welcome to write it in the chat, actually. I'm always curious. But otherwise, I'm just happy for you to have a think before I give you the answer. So just in case it's not obvious, is Denis Villeneuve, Arrival, is Hunger Games, The Exorcist, Grand Budapest Hotel, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Shape of Water, Bad Moms, Twilight, Lord of the Rings, and The Beguiled. So interestingly, this is how it is divided. So I knew that usually I get quite a few curious faces, especially when I talk about Lord of the Rings, which technically is an indie film. So Lord of the Rings was one of the riskier, independently financed film of all times. Uh, but New Line Cinema, Grand Budapest perhaps indie, I saw that now. No, funny one. It's actually part of Fox's. So Grand Budapest Hotel, although everything about it very much screams indie, in my opinion, technically it was packaged by Fox Search. Fox Searchlight. Um, so Lord of the Rings at the time, yeah, was like one of the biggest bets for the independent film market, and you had buyers being terrified because it was all like a lot of it was financed by pre-sales. So in the way any indie film is financed, which is in a way very, very risky. Now, so what's the definition of an independent film? So technically what you would find in an actual textbook is an independent film is a feature film that is financed outside of the major film studio system, in addition to being produced and distributed by independent entertainment agencies. So at the very start, the whole point is the money. Who gave you the money? It determines if your film is studio or indie. But technically, in everyday's life and in such a changing landscape, the situation is really quite different, and it's much more fluid. And studios come on board at later stages on films after they're financed. But what we can start by saying is talking about what is definitely a studio film. Actually, let's go through that after. There are a couple of other ways that you can that people like to define indie films, which is the first one is what I just mentioned, which is finance, distribution, and production. So the business model behind the film defines if it's studio or indie. But another thing could be the theme. So I have quite a few people that would consider, in the same way that Jerry said, the Grand Budapest Hotel. Usually, if a theme is potentially like it feels very original or it feels like socially relevant, there's some people that feel like that should be enough to consider a film more indie rather than studio. And the third way to that some people like to sort of like divide or box up the films is by thinking about your tasting freedom of the director. And I'm going to talk again about the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's one of those scenarios where, yes, it is technically financed by a studio, but if you're Wes Anderson, you have that level of artistic freedom that means you're quite mildly confined by studio executives. And so you'll have quite a few experts that believe that if a director has the chance to actually make up their own mind without being constantly constrained by the studios, that should already count as an indie. So let's quickly run through what is definitely a studio film, because that makes it slightly easier. So studio films are movies that operate on a completely vertically integrated film. So a studio film will, the studio owns the copyright of the film forever, in perpetuity, in every media possibly created. So, I mean, Disney created The Lion King, and if we colonize Mars and we have a completely new technology, they already own now the right to be able to exploit those rights on Mars in 1,000 years. Well, probably a little less than that. So the big difference is that the value of the film is completely harnessed in each stage of the life cycle of the film by the studio. And I like to use as an example Despicable Me. First of all, because I don't like to always talk about Disney, which is kind of like, it feels like it's get discussed a lot. And second, because it became such a huge recognizable cultural phenomenon a few years back. So Universal owns Illumination Entertainment as a production company. So the guys who did the first Despicable Me. Universal owns all the rights to remakes, sequels, spin-offs. So they can go ahead forever if they wanted to. But that's where the big difference comes from. So that's the huge difference between studio and indie. It's international distribution. So a studio will distribute a film either through their own distribution channel in each territories, because Universal will have a lot, or through their output deals, so with local partners in the territories. This means that they do not have to go through negotiating a deal in each territory for each film, which instead is what happens on an indie film. And in the case of Universal, they also own the cinema chains. So not only they'll be able to control the full life cycle of the film from the very beginning up until everywhere in the world, but in certain territories like the States, the fact that they own Fandango, that means that they also get the value from exhibition and obviously film merchandising. So you get to a point where everything on that brand still goes towards the revenues of the studio. Now, I want to quickly talk about studios. So they used to be called the Big Six. It's already 5 of them because, as I'm sure you've all have heard, Disney bought Fox. We know that by now, and they're finalizing everything. So the Big Six studios are Walt Disney, Columbia, Warner Brothers, Universal, Fox as Disney, and Paramount. Now, what I read and what I keep hearing is that within the next 5 years, it'll probably get down to 3, just because of how risky the film business is and how important it is to just have a huge scale and being able to invest a lot. So it wouldn't surprise me if we had some more mergers and acquisitions within the next few years. In the past, studios were different. There was United Artists, the Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Radio Picture. They're all not considered studios anymore. So we know that things can change or go bankrupt and move around. And then I think it's worth talking briefly about mid-sized indie studios, because they're kind of like in between. So Lionsgate, for example, they're the guys who did the Hunger Games saga. So Lionsgate, it's in between because it is technically, it has the studio level films, but it only has its own distribution in some territories and some output deal. And in other territories, it will still have to go through film by film, territory by territory licensing in that same way that an indie sales agent will have to go through. Same for SDX Entertainment and Entertainment One, who recently got bought as well. So it all moves quite quickly. And then obviously you cannot not talk about the new Hollywood major studios. Now, if we had time, I'd probably just do a whole lecture about how much these guys have changed completely everything we know. But I feel like it's quite helpful for you to have an overview of the way the things, like a panoramic picture of the way things are right now, to then sort of check back in a few years' time to see how much it changed. Because Netflix, Amazon, they've just came in a few years ago, and at first just as buyers, so they seemed just like new distributors, sounds great, new clients, and then they started producing content, and then they've changed completely the way content is distributed and consumed, and completely disrupted the whole thing. So when talking about studios, it's quite tricky now to be able to pin down what is what. And then in the next 2 years, we'll see the rollouts of completely new digital giants launching their own content and platforms. And so how can you actually not consider Facebook a Hollywood studio the second that they properly start producing content. And we've already seen Apple TV starting to roll out their content plans for the new year. So there will be a lot to actually keep track in the next 1 or 2 years. Really, by the end of 2020, we'll have a lot of new players. So what is a sales agent? Like, I hope I've given you a little bit of an overview of like how studios work from an international distribution point of view. What's the big difference with a sales agent? So sales agents basically represent the film outside of the territory in which it's produced. And it's the same for television. It's just like my experience is in film. So I will probably always be talking about film, but it's quite really similar for television content. So a producer usually should or may be able to get a deal to distribute a film within the territory in which it's produced, but then it will need to partner up with a sales agent who will use market experience and relationship with distributors in order to actually find international distribution for a movie abroad, territory by territory. And then the distributor will be the one that puts the action in front of an audience. It rolls it out and actually brings it to cinema chains and television and takes care of localizing the version. So different types of sales agents. They're the really big guys. I've already mentioned Lionsgate. Film Nation is probably the biggest sales agent out there. These are the kind of films that they deal with, but they obviously are massively involved in financing as well. Usually by pre-sales, but also they have like financing partners so that they can bring on projects when they come on board really early. Film Nation has been defined as the little Oscar powerhouse. I feel like last year they had so many titles that were part of their slate. And what is particularly fascinating is that the big streamers, both Netflix and Amazon, have deals with Film Nation to actually partner up and sell and get them to sell their content for leftover rights. So, for example, Film Nation is representing The Irishman for, trying to find theatrical partners abroad for Netflix. So they'll just sell all the leftover rights. So they're really worth knowing. Other types of sales agents, these are kind of the standard sales agents. We work with movie from like micro budget up until like $20-25 million. They're mainly focused, I'd say you'd have a lot of sales agent in London, you have sales agent in Paris, and there are a few in other like European key territories, mainly focused either like on local language or festival films. There are quite a lot of sales agents, but not, I mean, it's still, they're all quite small companies. But yeah, have a little look, and they all specialize in different things. You'll have, sales agents are really good with art house films, sales agents are really good with genre films. So just like do a little bit of research. There are library sales agent. I'm not sure how this is relevant to you as as you're trying to get a new project off the ground, but it's an extremely valuable business, meaning that library sales agents are just people that take an existing catalog of films that already had their theatrical release and go out there and sell them on a second cycle type of licensing deal. So for example, they'll sell digital rights. They're the guys that'll make sure that, Pretty Woman is still on television on a Friday night, and everyone will be very happy. And then there are short film sales agent, which it's a bit of a gray area because I'm not entirely sure in terms of how easy it is to actually like do business on short films. So, but there are out there, and they mainly hang out at short film festivals, and they can be extremely helpful. Now, the role of sales agents. So there are two ways that a sales agent can get involved. And obviously the most relevant one is early stages and pre-sales, meaning that when a sales agent gets involved early on, that's when a sales agent will have a say in the packaging and will go out there, will go to film markets and will pre-sell the film. And the money that is coming from these pre-licensing agreements goes to constitute parts of the budget. So that's obviously when you would want a sales agent to come on board the project, because it would maximize the revenue and it would really help with financing. The other way, it's a servicing deal. So a servicing deal, it's when a movie or a TV series, well, it's trickier for a TV series. Let's take a movie. When a movie is completed and maybe it's screened at a festival, and the sales agent picks it up and uses their relationships and their knowledge of the market to bring it out there, get it in front of people, get in front of distributors, and have it seen. Now, pre-sales are tricky. They didn't used to be. Up until a few years back, you could still do a lot of deals with pre-sales because there is so much content right now, and it's just so tough to actually like break through the noise. And distributors have lost a lot of money in the past few years. One of the reasons, obviously, is the fact that nobody buys DVDs anymore, and that was like a huge source of revenue. And the window system has been collapsing, and people have been going less to the cinema. There are, I'd say that the disruption of this streamers definitely has had a huge impact on pre-sales. It is a trickier time to get pre-sales, but there are a few genres, sort of like types of projects that still get a lot of pre-sales, and those are big ensemble cast. So for example, 355 was launched, was that in Cannes last year or 2 years ago? And with a huge presentation, the fact that it was this big ensemble cast that managed to get a lot of attention, a lot of momentum, and some wonderful pre-sales. Genre still works because it has such a clearly defined audience, and it is not as much execution dependent as other type of films. And the other one is sort of like really well recognized authors. So that's the case for any usually festival darlings in general. If you say, okay, this is next Pavel Pawlikowski's movie, you're probably going to be able to get pre-sales, because then you'll be able to sell it to that audience just by using that name. This is no way, in no way a way to say, okay, this is all that will get pre-sales, but definitely these three types of film are kind of more pre-sellable than others. So let's talk a little bit about the role of the sales agent, what sales agents do for you. The core value of the sales agent is the ability to evaluate the commercial potential of a project by providing accurate sales estimates. Now, sales estimates are everything but rocket science. So sales estimates are basically a price sheet divided the territory by territory, where you're trying to allocate value to the film. And obviously, the reason why it's so tricky to evaluate a film before it's made is because there are so many things in play. First of all, well, the director may deliver not a great film if you have a great script. There could be a lot of bumps in the way. The cast will have a value that changes. It could get like a type of rating. So the only way for a sales agent to try and give really good sales estimates, just like being out there, talking to the distributor, just like being in the market, knowing what's going on, being out there and chatting. Because sadly, studios do have a lot of data, they're internal, but when you're trying to evaluate the commercial viability of an indie project, it's tricky because reporting is really not transparent. So you want sales agents that have a lot of experience, they're out there talking and just trying to understand what the value of something is going to be maybe 2 years down the line, because that's when people will actually go and see it. So that's why, it's very specific, being able to provide really good sales estimates. And when a sales agent provides you with sales estimates, they'll do it by the numbers that they'll give you are a minimum guarantee. So the minimum amount to be paid by a distributor to the sales agent in exchange for the right to distribute the film in that territory. Now, how do sales estimates look like? This is just an example. They're divided by territories, and they will have an ask and a take price. The medium, it's not always as kind of like a, some people do it, some people don't. The take price is the minimum guarantee. So that's kind of like the minimum that the sales agent is telling you, I'm going to get that out of a distributor. And the ask price, that's what I like to call basically the buy now button on eBay. So if I come in and say, yes, I want $800,000 for that film from France, it's unlikely that a distributor will offer that to me on the spot, because they know they can probably get it for less. But if they want to be able to avoid competing with other distributors, that's the number that they will give me. Basically, I mean, it's a quite standard way of competing for something, but that's how they look like. Interestingly enough, because sales estimates are really tricky to get right, I have been seeing sales agents who are quite reticent to the idea of actually providing sales estimates. I've starting to see, especially the big agencies in the US, started to suggest that, to just bring a movie to the market and see how it goes, which makes financing really, really tricky. So this is something else that is also changing. We'll just have to stay tuned and see how it goes. Box office territory, I'll quickly run you through this, but it's something that's interesting to know. So the way a movie is sold, it's not country by country, but it's by box office territories. And it's fascinating because some of the box office territories are not exactly relevant countries. So Scandinavia is still sold as a single territory. Ireland is sold as part of the UK. The former Yugoslavian territory are all sold together as if it was like one big country, although they have to like dub and sub in like 7 different languages, which is not exactly ideal. So that, I mean, that's quite specific, but it's interesting to know when you'll see those kind of, details, and you'll be like, why am I not just selling to Sweden, or why am I not just selling to Norway? Now, just for you to know how actually important a sales agent can be, I wanted to list briefly what are the responsibility of a sales agent. So a sales agent will be the person that decides, along with the producer, but will majority of the time have final say on where the film will have its world premiere and which one will be the festival strategy. So that's something to keep in mind, to be, deciding exactly what's the best way to give the film the most exposure and where to present it. That's something that the sales agent will have to think about as a strategy. International poster and trailer. So the first marketing of the film, so the international poster and the trailer that is going to go to all the distributors, that is something that the sales agent has to do. The sales agent does it, and then local distributors are allowed to actually change and have their own version, but they will have to go through the sales agent in order to have approved that each local key art and trailer. So you want a good sales agent to know how to do good marketing. Delivery of materials to distributors, especially for those of you who wants to produce, that's something that producers very, very rarely actually keep in mind, which is the fact that you actually have to be able to deliver a certain amount of elements. And the sales agent will be the person to whom you deliver, because then they deliver to distributors. So something to keep track of, like something to keep in mind, is when you're doing your sales agent's agreement, is to have a look at the distribution and at the delivery schedule, because that's something that can be quite costly, and you need to be aware of what is needed to actually do a full delivery. Approval of international release strategy. So say that the sales agent has distributed everywhere the film. So local distributor will have to go and talk to the sales agent to decide the scale of their release and how they're going to do it. So like which key cities, key markets, how big, prints and advertising. This is all something that gets discussed by distributors with the sales agents on obviously a film by film, territory by territory basis. So quite important. And then this is particularly relevant when a sales agent comes on board at early stages. So first of all, you're going to get a lot of notes from sales agent on the final draft of the script. Why is that? Because for a sales agent have an international, overview. So the notes that you will get from a sales agent will be different from the notes that you're going to get from other stakeholders within the industry. For example, sales agent will have to be mindful of censorship, and there will be certain themes that may not be sensitive at all, say in the US or in the UK, but you may have pushback in different territories. The sales agent will have ideas on cast, especially when they're part of packaging, because different actors have different values in different territories. So you will have to keep in mind the different value of actors. Like I can tell you, because I've been selling to Italy and Spain for a lot of years, and there are actors, they're extremely valuable there, that were very famous in the 80s, that if I try to sell the same films in different territories, they're going to be like, we haven't seen those guys. I'm not going to make any names just because we're recording, but you can write it in the box and I'll tell you who. And they're going to be like, well, we haven't seen those guys in 30 years. Like, why should I pay you a bunch of money for them? So sales agent will have to be mindful of the different value that actors will have. And so they'll have approval on final cut majority of the times. They'll want to know cast. So you really want to have a good relationship with them, because it is helpful to have a really good outlook on the international distribution really, really early on. Now, how do sales agents operate? So film markets are the time where sales agents and distributors meet. That's when the majority of deal making happens. It's a very, very stressful time. And I always try to stress the difference between a film market and a film festival. I know it sounds quite obvious, but because, for example, the European film market and the Cannes film market happen at the same time as the Berlinale Film Festival and the Cannes Film Festival, some people have like some confusion. So this is like an example of the type of films that were selected for the Cannes Film Festival. Obviously, that's curated; it's completed films. Well, a Cannes Film Market, there was a lot of conceptual art, different types of, definitely different types of films. Some ended up being made, some didn't. And then again, that's film festival. It's a lot of glamour, and it's a lot of people looking gorgeous. And film markets, it's just like people just trying to do deals. So, final one: film festival, film market. That's me at the last American film market. I think I gave away so many of those stress relief tea bags. And by the end of it, I felt a little bit like people just like, are you the one with the stress relief tea bag? It's like, yeah, that's me, guys. So the purpose of film markets is to bring buyers and sellers of entertainment together. Now, it is 2019, and technically I can tell you a majority of this could be done online. The reason why we do it is to, well, first of all, because it's nice, to have actually a face-to-face relationship and still know who you're talking to, and kind of have like some brief chats about how the business is going. And everyone loves, company paid food. But other than that, it's a good time to create a momentum for the film. So if you want to really stimulate competition and have different buyers and different distributors trying to all go for your product, it's good, to have those set times of the year where people actually get together. So the film market year starts off with the European film market in Berlin. The European film market is a bit more art house than others. It's not as well attended from American sales agent and American distributors because it's so shortly after Sundance that people are sort of still, kind of recovering, especially in the past few years where we've seen some crazy money being spent at Sundance. So it's not as huge, but there's a lot of attention of titles that are in competition within the festival, and a lot of European art house. The biggest time of the year is obviously the Marché du Film, so that's in Cannes. It's the same time as the festival. You have a lot of big packages being sold around that time and presented around that time. Especially because you have a lot of talent in town, so it's good to actually prepare. It's a good time to have a really big presentation if you already have people attending, premieres. So, there is again quite a lot of importance placed on festival titles. So they're screening in Cannes, but I'd say that there is a little bit of everything. And then there is the American film market, which I imagine is probably the one that you are the most familiar with. It's in November. It's not tied in with a film market, with a film festival, although AFI is a few weeks after, even only 10 days after. So it is in proximity, but it's not as obviously connected as the other two. And it's definitely the most commercial one. It's really good for genre films. I think that the Sharknado saga was launched at the American film market. And you have a lot of Asian buyers, quite a few of the Australians will attend. You have the Latin American buyer. You don't have as many Europeans because they already had the whole year. And the way film market works, sales agent to travel there, it's usually for the big ones, is the whole team. And then we would put up an office by putting posters everywhere, either in hotel suite, or we'll rent out an apartment and make it look like an office. And then for 10 days, you have half an hour meetings back to back with distributors from all over the world to try and secure those licensing deals in order to help financing films and TV series. Now, a little bit of advice if you want to attend. I think that there are some incredible opportunities at those markets, especially European film market is really good for co-production. They have a really good co-pro market. So if you're considering setting up the finance of your film as a co-production, that's a good one to go to. If you want to pitch your idea or your script, I think it's very important to keep in mind a few things. First of all, always research the company. So know that what you're doing may fit their slate. but also make sure that you find the right acquisitions person. So don't go talk to a sales agent. Do actually try and find the acquisitions person that will be selecting the projects. And the other thing is the majority of the deal making happens during the first weekend. So if you want to do sort of like pitching meetings, try to go for like the second weekend of Cannes, the final days of the American film market in general, just because sales agent will be completely focused on trying to close deals with distributors at that time. Secondary film markets, so that's quite interesting. It's more for deal making and a bit less for acquisition. So because it's so actually really quite expensive to attend those film festivals and those film markets. In the past few years, sales agents have kind of been going through a divide and conquer type of scenario, and so you would only send like one person, and secondary film markets are very helpful because that way you can meet buyers that you may not meet at the really big film markets. So, for example, Hong Kong is really good for genre. The Asian film market as well. That's in Busan. Ventana Sur in Buenos Aires is fantastic for Spanish-speaking language. And TIFF is a funny one because Toronto has been growing a lot as a festival, but I do say that distributors and sales agents mainly focus on the titles that are in competition and they're screening. So it is really tricky to actually try and get the attention of distributors and sales agent if your film is not part of the festival itself. And then there are TV markets. So TV markets are, definitely great for deal making. I wouldn't suggest that much to go there and pitch your idea to film markets because they're really quite short. So like MIPCOM and MIPTV are only 3 days. And it's mainly like huge content holders meeting broadcasters. And it's kind of like more of a time to just kind of like strengthen already existing relationships. So yeah, there's much I would say about TV markets. So let's have like a quick run through of what to look for in a license agreement. So in a scenario where you've sent your sales agent out there and they've managed to actually like secure international distribution for the film, what has been agreed? What is actually out there in a license agreement? So a distribution agreement will have a few key elements. And the first thing will be what I mentioned before, which is the advance or the MG. So the minimum guaranteed amount that a distributor will be paying in order to have the rights to distribute the film in their territory. Second is set the territory. So exactly what we previously discussed when I show you the different box office territories. So it's important to know exactly where the film will be distributed. And it seems quite straightforward, but there are I've seen deals fall through just because there were some little issues with the territories. For example, like tiny islands that you're not sure if they should be sold together with the United States or sold together with Latin America. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind. Language. So is the film going to be dubbed? Is the film going to be subtitled? Is the distributor going to be allowed to exploit the film in its original version? This is all something that is going to go on your distribution agreement. Right. Rights, obviously, especially when we're talking about pre-sales, so when we're actually trying to, finance a film, I would usually be selling all rights. So a package of rights in a territory that allows a distributor to exploit the different windows. So first of all, theatrical rights, and so actually showing the film in cinemas, and then video rights, so electronic sell-through and actual DVD sales, and then you'd have your digital VOD, pay TV, and free TV as the last one. So that's something that obviously will have to be discussed. If any of you would like to know a bit more about rights, we can take some time to talk about that later in the questions, because obviously since VOD players have come into play, it's more rare that you'd actually be able to sell the whole package of distribution rights. And obviously the terms, so you're usually not signing away your movie forever, but you will have to decide for how long. So that's relevant. And the last but not least, actually the most important thing, is the revenue share or backhand. And the reason why I talk about it is because we call it sales and we call it sales agents, and there is so much of it that it sounds like it's connected to sales, but it should actually always be referred to as international licensing, because really we're not giving the movie away forever. What a sales agent is doing is entering a partnership with a distributor to represent the film in the different territories. So distributors and producer will share the profits that the film makes, and the sales agent will take a percentage of it. So the way those profits are shared, that is something that will be structured within a distribution agreement. Now, I wanted to run you through quickly the independent film value chain in the way it's basically distributed, and let you know where a sales agent is involved and when they're not. So development, I'm sure you know, that's the part where you're actually like getting the idea together and attaching writers and attaching directors, getting a producer on board. Now, sales agents in the past few years have started to really get on board early on. So you'd find sales agents attaching themselves at development stage in order to make sure that even from that point of view, you're starting to have the version of that content that appeals the most to an international market. And then the following step will be financing and pre-sales. So sales agent usually help financing, not just by providing pre-sales, but a lot of sales agent will, in the past, in the next few years, have increasingly started to help out finding financiers and actually getting involved more and more in the finance of the film. Then there is the production, shoot, and post. That's a bit where actually sales agents are not as much focused on it. That's where you would get notes on cuts and rushes, but mainly that's the most creative part, to where the suits kind of take a break. And then there's just proper international sales and licensing. So everything that hasn't been pre-sold, everything that is still available, that's around the time where sales agents really step in and negotiate each deal for each territory and find partners so the movie can be seen internationally. And then there is the bit of actual international distribution, and that's something that, as I mentioned before, sales agent and the local distribution would discuss together and find the way of how to bring to the audience that content, what's the best way, how much it can be spent, and how. And the final bits are exhibition and exploitation, so actually people seeing it and final consumption. Now, I wanted to round up today's webinar by talking a little bit about the challenges in the industry, because obviously this model is very ripe for disruption. It has been going. It has had ups and downs. It survived VHS and sorry, I'm just. May I please ask how gross versus net money revenues enter into this prep no varying from 20%? Perhaps not. I'll quickly finish the part of industry challenge, and I'll happily answer to Jerry's question.
Oh, hey, and you're doing great, and this is so great.
Sorry?
I forgot to tell you up top. I said you're doing great, and this is awesome. I forgot to tell you up top, in the future for the other webinars, if you could read the question too, out loud when you get to it. Just read the question out loud so then we know what it is. Everyone knows what it is. I forgot to mention that. But,
Got it. Okay. Is that right if I just finish? I still only have one
slide. Of course. No, you're doing great.
I'll just finish that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just forgot to tell you, and so I wanted to while you were on it.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, no problem. All right, we'll get to it in a second. Great. So yeah, quickly going through industry challenges. So yeah, as I was saying, there changes in the past few years. Yeah, we've seen a lot. The industry survived the death of VHS and then the death of DVDs, and now they're just kind of going through streaming. And I feel like streaming is really going to change a lot of the way things are done, especially because you can kind of just like online get content everywhere, so you almost won't need neither sales agent nor distributors. So the new local hubs of streamers that are starting to do a lot of local production, they are probably going to get completely change the current mode. And obviously it is the golden era of serial content, which is wonderful because we're seeing so many incredible shows, but obviously this is driving people away from theaters. So one of the reasons why the business worked the way it works was because everything could be exploited in different windows. Sorry, I always do this when I say windows. But the problem is that right now, people usually are actually only watching one way, and people are tending to just watch television at home a lot more. So it's trickier to get that kind of revenue out of the different exploitation windows. Another big issue connected to how well television is doing is that if you're trying to finance a film, stars are actually not available for very, very prolonged periods of time. So you'll have a scenario where one helpful way to actually get a movie pre-financed, pre-sold, is by having a star in it. And now the problem is that you may have actors engaged in TV series for months and months, so that's another issue. And then obviously the huge problem is just like there is so much out there. It's really tricky to actually break through the noise and trying to get the attention of an audience and the attention of international audiences. So it's a really, really tricky time, but at the same time, it's really exciting to see how things are going to change. Also because now that there is so much room for different ways of distributing and having your content seen on so many different ways on different platforms, there's more room for diversity and, serving more underrepresented audiences. And I think, that it's because sales agents and, independent distributors have to be taking more risks. It's actually a really good time to start partnering up really early on and trying to get, the content abroad in a way that isn't necessarily going through the streamers. So my suggestion is do a lot of research, choose carefully your partners, and approach them really early on, and get together to create the most internationally appealing version of that content that you want to write or produce. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. I'll get now to the questions. So, well, I don't know how to change my slides anymore. There we go. Okay, so let me go through the questions. Can I answer live if I get Jared? Okay, so fantastic. So I got a question from Gerald saying, may I please ask, how does gross versus net money revenue enter into all of these preps? Is there a way for me to actually get Jerry to speak to me?
No, but we can, but he's active, so you can have him chat in the chat box at you or follow up on the question.
Oh, great, because I'm not sure exactly how. I think I needed a little bit more specific, because I mean, gross versus net, that's something that you would get into detail when you're deciding on your revenue shares. There are different types of models for when you are sorry, I just get confused by reading the question, trying to answer.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Let me say this. Well, that, I mean, in this scenario, gross versus net, it would be really just something connected to how you structure the deal internationally. We usually would do. You don't really start sharing the profits until you've actually recouped the minimum guarantee, but there are certain deal structures where you would do a gross corridor and ticket sales, but I do think that that's like a quite specific question and may take a bit of time of like actually going through deal structure, which I'm not sure would possibly be the easiest way to get into it. Yeah, I'm sorry if that doesn't help.
No,
It's
it's
just
all good.
Okay, so Keith saying, have no representation. I'd like to set up a meeting with some company at AFM. What's a good strategy to do so before attending? So I would say definitely just like reach out, even start at the beginning. So it's like, second week of October. That's a good time to start. And I'm answering live. And look into the companies, have a look, check what type of content they're selling, what type of things they're actually looking for, and find who is the acquisitions person. Don't go directly to sales agent, and then just sort of like try to set up a meeting. I'd always say avoid don't send any material on the first email. That's something I always say to everyone. Just kind of like touch base and be like, will be good. This is what I'm working on. Maybe, send like a general description, but don't send any material. Reach out to the acquisitions person, not to the sales agent. And if you want to get in there, go towards the end rather than at the beginning, because that's when majority of people will be very, very focused on doing international distribution deals, so meeting distributors rather than talent. Any other questions?
I actually have a question.
Yes.
I have a couple. One is really specific, so I think I wanted to start there. How do movies get on airplanes? Like, is that something that's negotiated?
It's a territory. Yeah, it's a territory.
And is it negotiated depending on the like commercial company too? Because I know like Delta.
No, so you would do the deal with an airlines distributor. So that's why a lot of time they happen to be there before. and then they would do sub-licensing to the different companies. So I wouldn't, like, if I sell to airlines, I'm not going to speak directly to like Delta or British Airways. There is someone who then does actual like aggregation sales to them. And airlines deal can be, I mean, you get like a really good money, and they can pay decent MGs, but they're also, it's really good for revenue shares. Like I've done quite a lot of deals with no MGs on airlines, and it's just like, then the sub distribution deals actually come in, and some really, really good money can be made on those. But yeah, but that's why you may see stuff on planes before it comes out in theaters, which is fascinating.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah,
I'm on a lot of airplanes lately, and I'm like, how did
right.
you, like, this movie wasn't great, but now they probably made money because it's on an airplane. So yeah, that makes sense. And then you mentioned a few times, like, especially getting started as a sales agent, using networking that you've had. So how do people get started? Because if you want a sales agent, there's obviously probably ones that are like way more connected, or so do people like intern? Like, how do they start their career?
Oh, to become a sales agent?
Yeah, just, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely say interning. For me, it was an internship, and like it's a career in itself. It's like someone wanted to work in international sales. Yeah, interning, because it's so specific. So just getting out in there and just starting to learn as much as possible.
Yeah.
And definitely internships. I guess that's the way to go. I don't think it's because it's such a specific type of knowledge that there is no way of really like getting to sales from a completely different area, because it's all relationship based. So I guess that's the way to go.
Yeah, I was just curious because it seems more
Yeah.
relationship based than others. And then you mentioned, because we have time, I was curious if you talk a little bit about rights, like about how the different
Yes.
rights are negotiated, just because we have some time, and I'm curious.
Yeah, no, sounds great. So how are the rights negotiated? So as I was saying, in a standard deal, the way you would do is just like you would sell all rights. So you will have theatrical, and then you would sell, video with electronic sell through, download to own, and then you would sell pay TV, and the last one would be free TV. In terms of like, would you want to know a little bit about like how you do revenue shares on different types of rights? So the standard way, up until a few years ago, you would have on theatrical, you would share as cost of the top. So everything that gets spent to actually bring the movie to the cinema is on, calculated before anyone shares anything, and then 50-50, and you go revenue on that. So you would use all of that money to recoup both the minimum guarantee and the costs of the top, and then you split 50-50. And then for DVD and video, because it used to be so expensive to actually create the physical copy, it would be on a royalty based. So the distributor would bear all the costs and keep 80% of the revenues from that, and just give a clean, usually like 20 or 25% royalty to the sales agent slash the producer on DVDs. Obviously now that's a bit, because DVD revenues have become so almost non-existent. And then on television, because usually the cost of doing a localized version of the movie should have been absorbed by the theatrical release, usually the sales agent would get a higher percentage on TV sales. So that would be usually like 70% for the sales agent and like 30% for the distributor, or like 60-40. And so the same for like pay TV or digital sales and VOD. Now, because actually getting, overages, it's not the easiest thing to do, and you actually have to chase them up, and you have to create reports and distributors sometimes are, not the quickest in doing so. I've been seeing in the past few years the model shifting towards a 50-50 on every right, and just like to make it easier. But the fascinating thing was, the standard has always been to sell all rights. And then a few years back, it was actually Weinstein Company that for the first time ever attempted to sell the film. I think it was Hateful Eight at the time, to sell the film by withholding SVOD rights. And that at the time was huge. Now you'll see that a lot. There are a lot of scenarios where you will be selling a film, but you will be keeping, subscription video on demand aside, because you can still have a worldwide Netflix deal and sell territory by territory all the other rights, which is something, completely new. So that's something that we've been, keeping track of, because it just changes basically. Every market you'll see something new, and you'll be like, oh, okay. You'll be like, oh, these other guys are doing this, so I can do it now. But it's been a lot of transformation, talking of rights, and you have all the different types of VOD. There is video on demand, like the biggest one is subscription, which is the various Amazon, and so SVOD, and now you have transactional video on demand, advertising video on demand, free video on demand. So you can enter into a lot of sub rights, and then what stays with the producer and the sales agent usually wouldn't own its subsidiary. So the sales agent wouldn't be able to negotiate unless specifically approved by the producer, like remake, prequel rights, like all of those, merchandising rights, soundtrack, live broadcasting, all of those usually are not part of the standard sales agreement. That's something that will just stay with the producer. If you if someone wants their sales agent to negotiate store rights on on their behalf, it's possible. But usually writers, usually producer will want to keep those rights for themselves, because they usually stay in perpetuity. So that's something that 50 years time, someone wants to make a remake of your film, you don't want to go look for your sales agent at the time. You just want to be like, right, ready to do it. Does that answer your question a little bit, Brianna? Great. I'm trying to see if there's any other. Oh, great. Okay, one from Jerry. Yes, Jerry, if you have another one, go far away. Yeah, I'm not seeing
I don't think it's in yet. I think he's just, go ahead. You can submit another question, Jerry, if you'd like. Anyone can submit a question, actually.
Kind of.
I have a few more minutes.
I'm trying to think of anything helpful I can say at this stage.
I have a helpful question, like just a general question. So let's say that writers are getting started and they're going to like local festivals or the bigger festivals. What are some great ways to better understand, like you've touched on a lot of this, but like I'm a writer, I have a little short and I'm in a local festival that maybe has a small market, right? Not like a major one. What do you think the best way is for me, this person like coming into this, to like connect with sales agents to better understand it, to distribute at random places just to get the, especially random streaming things, just to get the hang of it? Like what do you suggest as, there's the big dogs obviously, but what about like smaller indie project?
Well, you'll have quite a lot of smaller film festivals. They're organized actually, like sort of like one-to-one events, sort of like one-to-one moments where you can actually like. I think there was a really good one in Cannes, which was Meet the Streamers, and it was all about European smaller VOD platform. Like Mubi was in there. You'd have Filmin, which is from Spain. So I think first of all, definitely look out for actual events where you can book meetings in advance, like actually like speed dating with the streamer. Like there are quite a few of those. And then yeah, just go to networking events. And I think the basic is always just like remember the people in front of you are like be a person first, and not just like going with the straight pitching, but just kind of like gather information, ask a lot of questions. Um, and yeah, like I think like some of the best times to actually like make content is just like the opening and the night and the closing party, especially at smaller festivals. I wouldn't know that much in the US, but for example, like there are some really good for like um smaller ones, smaller festivals that will have a lot of like mix and match events that are really, really good to attend. So yeah, I think those are some fantastic ones. Just like research those, and I mean, Cannes really is expensive to attend, and I know that, but they do have quite a few really good ones of like small events where you can actually, just like meet the right people and try and properly find the right day with the right event where you will have like sales agents and producers with like the really best the mind focus on that particular thing. It's just like, this is what I'm doing today. It's just like, now's the time that I'm actually meeting writers, I'm meeting new talent, and just like go out there and talk to them. Yeah, great. Trying to see if there's anything else.
Any other questions, guys? If not, this was awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope everyone had fun,
Yeah.
and you're welcome to, if any other question pops up, just let me know.
Okay, will do. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.